Hi everyone, today's palette review is going to be on the palette that I was the most excited to try out for holidays 2018, and that is the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice palette. Now, this is a limited edition palette for holidays this year, and I'm sure Too Faced has ordered a ton of palettes, but this is highly sought after at this point, so I don't know how long this is going to last on shelves. Just keep that in mind if you're waiting to purchase this. It might not be around forever, and I doubt it's gonna make it till Christmas time, because I'm fairly confident it will sell out by then. Now, this kind of palette is sort of new for Too Faced this year for the holidays. In previous years, they have tended to release 3 different cardboard packaging palettes that kind of have like a ton of different eyeshadows, a blush, a bronzer, and like sometimes a mascara attached to the whole package. They did produce a white chocolate bar palette last year, but I don't really think it was part of the holiday collection. This seems to be more a part of the holiday collection, and the quality is definitely different than what you've come to expect from Too Faced holiday sets. I know there have been a lot of complaints in previous years about the cardboard packaging items, to be specific, that they were made in China, the quality was not that great. I never really experienced terribleness with those palettes, but I do know that people were complaining that those were produced in China, whereas the rest of their products is made in the USA. Now, this palette is made in the USA. It does say it's assembled in the Dominican Republic, but this should be no different than all of the other kind of chocolate bar palettes that Too Faced has released. It comes in the same tin packaging. You have the mirror on the inside with the cute little gingerbread man, and then your shadows are obviously on the bottom. They are no longer seeming to produce one of those longer strips, or actually 2 strips, that have, they tended to be like a brow bone highlight shade. They have a longer one there and then a bigger one down there as well, but they don't seem to be doing that anymore. I'm fine with that. I'd rather have more shadows overall, so I'm happy to see them removing that extra big shadow. One thing that I found a little bit strange about this palette though is that the eyeshadow size is actually 0.7 grams per shadow. In previous chocolate bar palettes, or anything that sort of comes in this tin packaging, they've all been like almost 1 gram, so they tended to be like 0.9 grams or 0.95 grams. I don't really know why there's less in here. The pan size doesn't look any different than any other Too Faced chocolate bar type product, so I don't know if these are just like heavier because of the shimmers or something, but there is slightly less product in here than they have had in other chocolate bar palettes. And I know I keep calling this a chocolate bar palette and it's not a chocolate bar palette, but because it comes in the same type of packaging, I'm just kind of referring to them all in the same sort of category. This is priced no differently than the chocolate bar palettes. You are paying $49 US or 59 Canadian. This has been a very standard price point for Too Faced for quite a few years, and I really appreciate them sticking to that. I've seen a lot of brands creeping up in price over the years, and Too Faced doesn't seem to have done that, in my recollection at least, so I'm happy that their price tag seems to be stopping at 59 Canadian and I don't have to be worried about them pushing closer to 70 bucks. Now, one of the things that I was curious about this Gingerbread Spice palette was how it was going to smell, because they're pegging it as smelling like gingerbread. I don't really think it smells like gingerbread. I think it smells sweet, maybe with a hint of spice, but I would never be able to tell you that this smelled like gingerbread if I hadn't been told that. So I think it just smells like a sweet product. It's not overpowering, but I did notice that the more I use the shadows, the more the scent tended to come out. So I think you kind of have to like break through the top layer before the scent really starts to appear. I'm not sensitive to scents. I know a lot of people are a little bit iffy on the scents from Too Faced, but I really like them, like really like them. So this is quite an appealing palette to me for that reason. All right, now that I've talked a little bit about what the palette looks like, I'm gonna slide in some swatches here so you can see exactly how these shadows look like on my arm. All right, now that you've seen the swatches, let's talk a little bit about the shadows that are in here. Now, I was really excited for this palette. When I first saw the packaging, I was like, oh yes, I am here for this theme. And then I saw the shadows on the inside and I was even more excited. Now, this is a little bit of a neutral palette, but when Too Faced tends to do a neutral palette, They tend to focus on a lot of neutrals and then they'll throw in a purple and a pink. And I'm so tired of seeing that same pink and that same purple in so many of Too Faced palettes that when I saw that this one didn't have those, I was so excited. This kind of color scheme is what is very me in a neutral palette. I like something that is more on the warm side of things, but also has more of like a jewel tone to some of the neutral shades. Neutrals for me have to have some color in them or they're really just kind of boring overall. So I'll take anything that is neutral based but has more of like a jewel tone to it. It really gets me excited about a palette. So when I saw this color combination, I was like, absolutely, I'm into it. In terms of the shadow quality, I feel like it's there. It's no different than any other chocolate bar palette that I've ever used. The mattes are smooth and super pigmented. They're easy to blend. I love putting Too Faced mattes in my crease and outer corner. It's a product that I know I can rely on because I use a lot of Too Faced products, and I think a large part of that is because I really like their mattes. They're pigmented, they're easy to blend, and their shimmers are good. They're not necessarily as good as the mattes, I feel like, but that's Too Faced across the board. So if you happen to like their shimmers in a different palette, you will like them in this one as well. I feel like they're all the same, but for me, the standout product of any Too Faced palette is always the mattes. Let me highlight some of the great shadows in here. Number one is Gumdrop here. That is the shade that drew me the most to this palette when I first saw it online. I had initially thought it was a red. It's not, but it is a deep fuchsia with a matte formula. They tend to put that kind of color, maybe a little bit more cool tone, but in a shimmery formula in most of their palettes, and I'm really happy that they've deepened it up and made it a matte because that's a color that I love putting in the outer crease, in the outer corner. I've got it on my lid today. It's a beautiful color. Spiked Eggnog is what most people are gonna think of as a traditional lid shade. It works out really well. It's a champagne color, but there's a little bit of pink in it. It's one of those colors you could always reach for, put it on your lid and pretty much grab any matte shade, put it in the outer corner, and you've got the easiest look, but it's gonna be really pretty. This palette also has a ton of crease shades that work for my skin tone, which made me really happy because I didn't always have to default to the same color. You've got Sugar Daddy over here, Looky at My Cookie, Gingerbread, and Gingerbread Latte, and those are all mattes. They're each kind of similar but different enough that I was happy because it could change up my look enough to not be like the same thing every time when I put in my crease. So I really like those. Gingerbread is actually deep enough that you can put it in the outer corner depending on what kind of color you have on the lid. Like if you use Spiked Eggnog on the lid, it is deep enough to put in the outer corner and add enough dimension. So I really like that. Spice is nice, wonderful, wonderful orange. I have that on the edges of my look today. I love that kind of orange matte shade. I use that a lot in my crease too. Oh, freaking love it. Hot Toddy. That color, when I first swatched it, when I got this palette, I was blown away. I don't think Too Faced has ever put out a shade like that before. It's like a, it changes color in different lights. So maybe it's a trichrome. In the pan, it looks like a deep cranberry. On my finger in different lighting, it kind of goes a little bit orange, and in some other lighting, it looked gold. That shadow is wild. I hope they put it in more palettes going forward because that is an absolute stunner. I wore it on my lid and I loved it so much. Okay, as for the more like jewel tone shades over here, they're interesting. This gold is very nice. I don't tend to love yellow golds too much on my lid, but it did seem to work out with the other shades that I paired with it. What's interesting to me though is that Spice of Life is, it looks like an olive in the pan. And it goes a little bit olive on your lid, but it tends to transform and look gold, and that's probably depending on how the light hits it. But the shade you're getting there, it's not gonna be that olive colored. It will kind of go a little bit more on the gold side of things. Two other shades that I use constantly would be Figgy Pudding and Reindeer Paws. Now, Reindeer Paws is the deepest color in this palette. They're both matte, by the way. And I found myself putting Reindeer Paws constantly on the outer corner just to deepen things up because that's how I tend to prefer wearing my makeup. I like a deep outer corner. I think the one shade that everyone's gonna point out is like not that great in here would be Frost Bite Me. And it's basically a chunky shimmer with flecks of glitter in it. It's something that I would put on the lid if I was using it wet. I haven't done it that way. I've only ever worn it on the inner corner of my eye, and I really liked it that way. It's a little bit more chunky. Most people aren't going for that look, I don't think, but I do like that sort of flaky look in certain colors. And in something that's a little bit white and on the more translucent side of things, I do actually quite like it that way. So in that respect, it worked out for me. And since it's really only one shadow, I'm not that bothered that the quality is different compared to the rest of them. Like the rest of the shadows are smooth, buttery, pigmented, etc. This one's just a little bit more of a chunky monkey, and honestly, it didn't bother me. Okay, so now let's take a look at the 5 looks that I created using this palette. The first look uses Figgy Pudding through the crease, Warm and Toasty on the lid, and then I put Reindeer Paws on the outer corner and dragged it through the crease. I also have Spiked Eggnog on the inner corner of the eye. This is definitely not the look that I thought I would create the first time using this palette, and I'm so impressed at how this looks because this whole palette seems very warm and gingerbready, but this look is very different, so I think it really shows the versatility that this palette has to offer. Now look number 2 is pretty much what I was expecting to create with this palette. This one has Gumdrop through the crease, Hot Toddy on the lid, such a beautiful color. I put Ooh Burn on the outer corner, and it was really interesting because that purple has a little bit of shimmer to it, and I wasn't expecting it to deepen up that outer corner as much as it did, but it really worked out well. I added Reindeer Paws on the outer V just to add a touch more deepness there, and then I put Frost Bite Me on the inner corner. I really did like how flaky this one was. I think it's a lot of fun on the inner corner because it adds a little bit of sparkle. For look number 3, I have Spices Nice through the crease. I really love this orange shade. I have Spiked Eggnog on the lid and on the inner corner of my eye. I really wanted to show that on the lid because I know a lot of people will opt to put it there. So I wanted to show you just how pretty it is in that location. I have Gingerbread on the outer corner, and then I put Reindeer Paws on the outer corner as well, just to deepen it up a little bit. I always went back to Reindeer Paws. It's such a fail-safe color for that outer corner area, and I feel like it worked every single time. For look number 4, I used Looky at My Cookie on my sort of upper crease area. My eyes are hooded, so I tend to put something in the upper crease first before I go into the crease. Really like this color there. It's kind of a pink shade, and it's absolutely beautiful. I then used Oh Snap to deepen up that crease color, so it's just a little bit lower than where Looky at My Cookie is. And then I put Spice of Life on my lid. And this color looks very olive in the pan, but it does tend to come across a little bit more golden on the eyes. And then of course, on the outer corner, I used Reindeer Paws again, just to deepen up that area. For today's look, I wanted to use my absolute favorite shades from this palette, just to show you the typical look that I would create with this. So I started with Looky at My Cookie and put that through my crease, just as my usual transition shade. I then layered Spices Nice over top of it. It mostly ended up covering that entire Looky at My Cookie color, but I think the two colors together do add a better blend towards my brow bone. I then put Gumdrop all over my lid. I did have to layer this a little bit. It is a matte shade and it can get a little bit dusty in some areas, but overall it did go on pretty nicely. Just be sure that you're patting the color on. To deepen up the outer corner, I used Figgy Pudding and Reindeer Paws together. I originally started with Reindeer Paws, but it was a little bit too brown, so I added Figgy Pudding on top, and then it was the perfect color for that outer corner shade. For the lower lash line, I used Reindeer Paws the whole way across the lid. That was blending out the pencil that I had used on my lower waterline. I then layered Figgy Pudding on top of it just to get a little bit more purple into the color. And then I used Spices Nice, which is in my crease, and blew out the corners of this look just to make it look really smoky and colorful. I then put Spiked Eggnog on the inner corner of my eye, and that was the entire look. This look is really pretty to me, and I'm so pleased with how it came out. I think it really shows you just how far you can take the Gingerbread Spice palette because it's a lot of color and it's really smoky. So I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I really like how it came out. Okay, so what did I think about this palette? Is there anyone at this point who thinks that I don't like it? Because I would be very surprised. I've called this thing beautiful, gorgeous, etc. I just really like it. Like, really like it. I was so excited for this palette, and I'm so happy to discover that it's not a dud. Sometimes you can be so into a makeup product that you want to force yourself to like it, and there was none of that with this one. All of the shadows in here were so much fun to use. I feel like the looks came together so seamlessly without really having to think about it. The color combination is very much up my alley for a neutral palette. I think a few people would look at this and say that it's colorful, but for a color lover, this is what I want to see as a neutral palette. Like for me, it's got the muted color tones and it's got a few pops of brights in here. This is exactly what I'm looking for in like a basics palette. So I think it's clear that I'm a pretty big fan of this palette. I'm just so excited by the theme, the color combination, and honestly, the colors in here get me excited because I want to see more like this from Too Faced. Clearly I'm a fan, clearly I have a lot of reviews on their products, but I feel like sometimes they just let colors go by the wayside and they stick to the neutral side of things. I want to see more like this. Like, give people the neutrals that they want, but pop in some color that's really enticing and that works really well in a palette, because I feel like the colors work so well with the more neutral side of things. Yes, there's a lot of sort of like browns in here, but they all work really well together, and there's enough color that it's just, I mean, I'm gushing at this point. This has made me really happy, and if this interests you, I would say go ahead and get it. So that is gonna be it for my Too Faced Gingerbread Spice Palette review. Hopefully you found this helpful. Let me know if you're gonna be picking this up, and I will catch you next time. Bye.